So about a year ago, I made a video titled Responding to the Worst Doom Review I've Ever Seen, and I had no fucking clue how much traction it was gonna get. Lo and behold though, that thing got like 500,000 views. Lately I've been kinda pondering about how I could make that video better, and today I finally decided I wanted to do it. And yeah, I'm pretty aware that countering Doom reviews or making fun of people who make terrible Doom reviews is pretty much 2 years old by this point and, you know, outdated. I still want to do it just because I'd rather have something completely finished that I'm content with. The video we'll be revisiting today is why I think Doom 2016 is better than Doom Eternal by Connor Shaw. And even though the title of the video sounds completely opinionated, I don't really consider opinions that are based off of misinformation valid at all. In fact, that's the whole reason I made the first video to begin with. I didn't think I'd have to say this, but apparently based on last fucking video I do. Try not to be a dickwit and go to this person's video and just, like, harass them in the comments. Just because I threw a few insults in the previous video does not mean you get to go and harass whoever I'm talking shit about in their video. But yeah, without further ado, let's take a trip down memory lane.
Upon dealing enough damage to demons, they'll glow blue or orange, indicating they can be glory killed. This is done by melee bashing the enemy to deal a lethal blow, with the animation modified by the enemy type, what angle you're approaching from, and the terrain upon which you're bashing. I'm not personally a fan of glory kills, at least not the frequency of which they're expected of you. To me, it feels like enemies simply have a bit too much health, and the glory kills lose their cool factor once you've seen the same animations play over and over again.
Looking back on this, I think the main issue that everybody had was that everybody thought that glory kills were something you had to do literally every opportunity you got. I guess it seemed like some sort of obligation to people for some reason, even though, you know, you can completely avoid it by just shooting them again. Personally, I don't think glory kills need to be used much at all. I think you should only be using them when you need health or when you're trying to charge up your blood punch. Maybe if you need a little break, you can jump into an animation for a few seconds and, you know, take a breather and release the tension, but other than that, I had literally no clue why people felt so obligated to glory kill every enemy they can. In addition to this, regarding the too much health thing, most enemies die to a single lock-on burst from the rocket launchers, so, I mean, not really what I'd consider too much health.
Doom 2016's roster of weaponry is mostly maintained in Eternal, with some new ones to boot, but missing is the infinite ammo pistol used as a last resort when your supplies run dry. In lieu of this, the chainsaw, when used on foes in Doom Eternal, will spawn copious pools of ammo in a rainbow spray. Frankly though, this system feels excessive. In 2016, the chainsaw was simply a get-out-of-fight-free card. Depending on your fuel levels, you could use it to chop down all but bosses to bypass combat with them altogether. Useful for when you're low on health or supplies. In Eternal, the chainsaw with its slowly regenerating gasoline sees more use to supplement an artificial lack of ammo. Weapons ammo supplies are noticeably lower in Eternal, and drops seem fewer and farther between. This effectively forces you to chop up a lightweight enemy every once in a while, and to compensate for this, basic enemies seem to infinitely spawn in areas you've long since cleared to serve as ammo caches. The gameplay loop of ranged combat to chainsaw to ranged combat isn't necessarily bad, but it feels more railroaded than 2016's freeform fights. The chainsaw feels necessary rather than being a fun option.
This is another common thing that I saw with people who are criticizing the game. In all reality, the whole reason chainsaw is now a mandatory mechanic is just to make a better combat loop. Essentially what it tries to do is it relieves the annoyance of having to run around looking for ammo pickups, which I found myself doing more than I'd wanted to in Doom 2016. And now in Eternal, I don't have to look for ammo on the ground because I can just make my own ammo and get right back into the fight. The stupidity of just having to run around looking for shit is gone. And a lot of the shit you'll see in this video is the individual saying, well, you know, I hate that Eternal did this because 2016 never did this. But in fact, 2016 did do that. And I'm talking about the whole railroaded combat thing. As I mentioned, 2016's combat loop was just shoot things until you run out of ammo and then go look for more ammo. Now in Eternal, it's shoot things and then make your own ammo by chainsawing something.
But the blood punch can bash foes to bits. Every time you get a glory kill, your blood punch will charge, and when it's fully charged, striking enemies with melee will enact a powerful swing in a radius, dealing massive damage and knocking armor off of certain kinds of demons. I enjoy blood punch overall, however, in contrast, the normal melee attack does literally no damage. It's slightly staggers enemies backwards, but unlike 2016, you can't resort to swinging away when pressured. What I'm trying to say is, the gameplay mechanics of Doom Eternal all feel as though they were developed independent of one another, with no consideration as to their interactions with one another. Freezing an enemy with an ice grenade and then lighting them on fire with your flamethrower leaves you with a burning icicle rather than melting them or dealing any damage.
See, I think the individual forgot to keep in mind that Doom Eternal is supposed to be arcadey. It has arcadey aspects that don't exactly correspond to real life. These are game mechanics. Being able to shatter or melt frozen enemies with the flame belch would make the game way too easy. Super heavies would become a joke, and all around it would probably just be really unbalanced, which is exactly why they didn't do such a thing. These mechanics do in fact work together, just not realistically, and people often forget that Doom Eternal isn't striving for realism. It's striving for fun, fast-paced combat that allows you to do a whole bunch of different shit with its mechanics. And the normal punch doing less damage complaint was something that I've heard a lot, and my only response to that is, why the fuck don't you just use your guns? You literally have like a 4-gauge double-barrel shotgun, a minigun, and like some big overpowered fucking energy blaster, and you decide, hey, I want to punch shit. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Being slowed down in certain levels, drowned in pools of purple goo, leaves you with no method of faster transit, despite the dash mechanic being introduced.
This part was one of the only parts that I can completely agree with. I think that the whole concept of purple goo is really lazily done, and it just kind of sucks. It doesn't really fit into what Eternal is.
Combat is meant to be fast-paced and ongoing, but is constantly interrupted by tutorial pop-ups or cutscenes indicating where to go next, seeing as the level design is doing you no favors in making that clear. Platforming off the beaten path to find secret extra lives and collectibles is encouraged, yet invisible walls and kill triggers are placed in otherwise innocuous positions. Those last two connect to one another quite well, by the way, as plenty of times tutorials or cutscenes would pop up in the middle of platforming, and during the time the screen takes to fade back into gameplay, the game is still going, meaning you'll end up falling and dying or being blasted by enemies you're in the middle of dealing with.
In the first video I made, I disagreed with the invisible walls point, because the invisible walls were, you know, not nearly as bad as they are now. For some reason, id Software decided, hey, let's just add a bunch of invisible walls that pretty much stop speedrunners from speedrunning. And honestly, it made the game a whole lot more linear and annoying to deal with. Although I am gonna throw a however question at this individual, and I'm gonna ask why exactly they tried jumping over the gate when the objective marker very clearly stated that you were supposed to go to the button. But yeah, let's just avoid the objective marker and then try to do something else that the objective marker doesn't want us to do, knowing how Doom Eternal works since you're already 6 levels into the game, and then yeah, start complaining for some reason.
I mean, the number of abilities on the HUD bound to different keys across the keyboard, it's like playing an MMO with the Marathon Man pace of, well, Doom. Some mechanics are outright competing with each other in their intended purpose. The chainsaw and crucible, the sword that is, could absolutely have been combined together into one weapon bound to one key. They serve the same theoretical function of quickly eliminating a close-range target to save on ammo.
In all honesty, the first time I ever watched this review comparison thing, I was fully convinced that this individual did not actually play the game based on that statement alone. Doom Eternal's crucible sword is like Doom 2016's chainsaw. It gets rid of anything you don't want to have to fuck with. It is not a mandatory weapon. It does not need to be used. I don't use it ever. Doom Eternal's chainsaw is completely different. It refills ammo. It doesn't save you on ammo, it refills it. It is your main source of ammo. These two mechanics are so incredibly differentiated from each other, and yet this individual kind of just threw them onto a fucking plate like it was a pile of shit, and it was all the same thing anyway. It most definitely isn't.
There are new Arc Vials, summoner-type enemies, who will spawn powered-up versions of demons who maintain their power until the summoner is killed. However, there is also the Buff Totem, which will continuously spawn and power up demons until destroyed. Why are these two separate mechanics? The fact that the game has to clarify with a pop-up when there's a Buff Totem nearby goes to show how similar and thus unnecessary having both of these features is.
This is pretty much just another example of bounding two things together that are completely different in all reality. The only similarity between Buff Totems and Arch Vials, by the way, not Arc Vials, Arch Vials, is that they both buff enemies. However, the way they work is insanely different to the point where they're not even really comparable terrible. Buff totems buff enemies immediately, but they're very easy to find and dispose of. You only have to glory kill them, and that's it. Archviles only buff enemies as a punishment for not giving them attention. The whole point of the Archvile is to pay attention to it and give it all your attention until it's dead so that it doesn't spawn anything else.
And that's not even getting into the new Empowered Demons feature added after launch. This will randomly power up demons who have killed other players during their own campaigns and drop more supplies as a reward upon being defeated. While I don't hate this conceptually, the fact that it effectively randomly buffs enemies means any difficulty balance this feature could supply has gone out the window. Speaking of the campaign, as I mentioned, I don't much care for the story of the Doom games, so I enjoy the ability to skip cutscenes, which was quite lacking in 2016. I can just enjoy the ride without asking why. However, the plot of Eternal is far less secondary as compared to 2016's, meaning that while cutscenes can be skipped, it feels weird to do so? There was clearly some thought put into this narrative as much as I dislike it, but during the cutscenes I did watch, it's clear the Doom guy also doesn't care about the story. All around him there's this creepy messiahification of him, which is really not pleasant to watch. It's not enjoyable nor interesting, just gross in my opinion.
Honestly, I'm not too big on the story of Doom Eternal either. The whole thing is kind of just a roller coaster of shit and dick that frankly I don't really care about. But one thing that Doom does as a franchise is that it expands upon itself with every game. And that's not just exclusive to gameplay, that also applies to story and lore. Believe it or not, lots of Doom's community is full of lore masters. Like, it's fucking crazy how much there actually are. Hell, one guy on Discord called Monologue wrote like a 150-page fucking lore book. So yeah, in the end, I think it's a good idea that they added more to the story than just big man shoots demons on Mars, or Phobos, or whatever the fuck. And as for the whole messiahification, quote-unquote, of the Slayer, I'm pretty sure anyone logically would shit their pants at the sight of a dude who can literally one-handedly destroy hell. Like, this dude is so powerful that despite being on their side, they're all terrified of him. And that's kind of why the whole messiahification thing even exists within the cutscenes and story.
The rune system makes a return from 2016, equipable unlocks which augment your abilities, such as more air control, faster glory kills, etc. There are also Praetor tokens, which augment your abilities, such as faster equipment cooldown, more quickly platforming, etc. There are also crystals, which increase your HP, ammo, and armor, and augment your abilities, such as faster flamethrower cooldown, more health on glory kills, etc. There are also weapon mods, which augment your abilities and have their own 2 currencies, which further... Okay, this could have all been one fucking system. Combine together the crystals, weapon points, suit tokens, mastery tokens, runes, all of it. Combine it all into one system of currency to purchase upgrades, or at least a smaller number of fragmented systems like Doom 2016. The menu is confusing, unintuitive to navigate, and remembering what upgrades you've unlocked is tricky in a pinch, not to mention that spending Sentinel batteries, another fucking system of currency by the way, to unlock upgrades in your home base doesn't auto-save the game, meaning if you wish to upgrade everything before taking a break so you can jump right back in next time, well, you can't.
You know, maybe the currency system is a little bit too complex. Maybe it's got too many aspects, yeah, sure. But what makes the least amount of sense to me is that you said 2016 didn't do this. You're acting like 2016 was better than this. In Doom Eternal, there's Sentinel crystals. In Doom 2016, there's Argent cells. In Doom Eternal, there's weapon points. In Doom 2016, there is also weapon points. In Doom Eternal, there's Praetor suit tokens. In Doom 2016, there was also fucking Praetor tokens. It just doesn't make sense to me why you said that Doom 2016 did this better when everything about Doom 2016 is the same, with the exception of mastery tokens. And I wouldn't even really consider Sentinel batteries as a currency. They just unlock currencies, that's all they do. And the whole reason they didn't combine every fucking currency together in either game is because then the player would be able to unbalance themselves to shit and back. All you'd really have to do to unbalance the game is just get the mastery from Meat Hook, and then get all the Sentinel crystals, that's it. And based on normal Doom Eternal progression, you could probably get all of that done by Super Gore Nest, which is like less than half of the game through.
The Marauder isn't a fun enemy to fight. This guy with a shield which can only be targeted at mid-range and is immune to weapons like the BFG or insta-kill sword, you know, the weapons you'd ideally want to save for powerhouses like this, rather than use on mooks. But anyways, the Marauder instantly shields itself upon incoming damage, except for right before its attack as its eyes glow green. In theory, this idea works well, especially during a mid-campaign boss battle which uses the same mechanic to great effect. In practice, however, every Marauder encounter is filled with backstepping, trying to maintain mid-range and waiting for him to stop using attacks he can't be shot during, and instead use the one attack during which he can be hurt. He can go for long stretches without giving you a window to attack, and it's seemingly random when he'll finally decide to be vulnerable. I don't understand why people praise this enemy. He's dropped in alongside waves of normal foes which rush you and interrupt your otherwise focused fight. The gameplay slows to a crawl every time the Marauder shows up. I found the famed super shotgun to be the most effective tool to deal with this foe, despite the new grappling hook to pull yourself towards enemies not serving much function here.
I like how he says that the super shotgun is probably the best way to deal with him, and yet you see him multiple times using like fucking full auto or, you know, the chain gun for some reason. Like, the game makes it pretty obvious that the heavier guns will stun him, and yet people seem to really heavily disregard that the first or second time they fight the Marauder. The only time I'd ever say this comment makes sense is if he was fighting like a buffed Marauder. Fuck buffed Marauders, I hate them. But yeah, here's a clip of me killing a Marauder with the easiest combo imaginable.
So let's take a step back and compare all of this to Doom 2016. Combat-wise, the game doesn't have nearly as many features and fewer enemy types to boot. But what is there is much more focused. You enter a room full of enemies, use your plethora of weapons to fight back, and the better you do, the more powerful your weapons will be via unlocking upgrade points. Exploration will unlock secret collectibles, runes, and suit upgrades. Again, those last two should have been one and the same, but I digress. Those runes, by the way, will feature fun little challenge missions completely removed from Eternal to unlock said upgrade. Level design wise, 2016 is missing quite the number of secrets and off the beaten path collectibles Eternal has on offer, but they aren't gone by any means. In addition, the classic level rooms are a fun little change of pace. In terms of layout, 2016's maps are a bit all over the place, but overall shorter from level to level. So I would get lost in both games, but not for nearly as long in 2016 as I sometimes could in Eternal. Both games are lacking a bit of direction to guide the player forward.
Not much to say for the first 90% of whatever the fuck he just said, but objective markers exist, is all I'm gonna say. And Doom Eternal does those a lot better than Doom 2016.
Gameplay-wise, however, 2016 simply plays better, faster, less downtime from tutorials and needless new mechanics.
Wait, you don't like the downtime from tutorials? I've got something for you.
Let's talk about something important. What is Doom supposed to be? Obviously, when developing a game, you can make it pretty much however you want. It's your product, or it in Bethesda's in this case. But the name and ideas of Doom assume a certain style of play. To me, Doom is fast-paced combat in a series of arenas connected by hallways with secrets off the beaten path. Demons and bloodshed, hell and brimstone with a variety of firearms to spice up gameplay. Doom 2016 does all of this, in my opinion, brilliantly. On top of that, there are also unskippable cutscenes which disrupt the flow, which is a bit obnoxious. Eternal, on the other hand, does all of these things very well, but in addition, there's 3D platforming, various side-grade kits, specific enemy weaknesses, and a level of difficulty that expects you to use all these mechanics in tandem without actually offering any particularly fun methods to do so. It's the same game as 2016 with a bunch of needless add-ons, filling up the HUD and taking up development time. I'm not saying Eternal should have been exactly the same game as 2016.
Yes, you are. You say Doom Eternal should have had less mechanics that are more fleshed out, and then you go and say that every mechanic in Doom Eternal is completely needless. So which one is it? Does every new mechanic not need to exist, or do some need to exist?
There are so many ways in which Doom Eternal could have been a direct upgrade to 2016, but instead it feels like the same game with tacked on bullshit. As a result, I prefer the simpler, clearer, more focused 2016. all the thrills without the frills.
Game bad because me bad at game. Yeah, that's essentially everyone's thoughts on the game when it first came out. I see it as an endurance test, personally. You just get through the stage where you're just absolutely shit at the game until you're no longer shit at the game. And those incompetent of doing so, well, they go and make videos like this. That's the end of the review slash comparison, whatever the fuck this was supposed to be. I'm honestly glad I did this because now I'm much more satisfied with what I've put out for you guys. So yeah, without further ado, if you liked the video, like and subscribe, and fuck yeah, I think that's it.